My name is Sophia, and I never thought money would break my family apart. That morning, I was sitting in my small house in Europe, holding a cup of coffee and watching the quiet street outside my window. It was a simple place, just 2 rooms and old furniture, but I had paid for it myself with years of hard work and saving every dollar I could. It was the only thing that truly felt like mine. My phone rang suddenly. It was my brother, Daniel. His voice was serious, almost cold. He didn't waste time with greetings. He told me that I should give him my share of Dad's inheritance. I thought he was joking at first, but he wasn't. He said he had a family to take care of, his wife Clara and their children, and that I didn't need the money because I was alone. His words hurt more than I expected. I tried to explain that the money belonged to both of us, that Dad left $120,000 and my half mattered too. But he kept repeating that I owed him. After the call ended, I sat there in silence, realizing something had changed forever. I didn't sleep that night. Daniel's words kept repeating in my mind, over and over, like a sound I couldn't turn off. You owe me. I stared at the ceiling of my small house in Europe, listening to the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. Everything felt the same, but nothing felt safe anymore. The next morning, I tried to continue my routine. I made coffee, sat by the window, and told myself it would pass. Maybe Daniel was just stressed. Maybe Mom would understand. But deep down, I already knew the truth. This wasn't just about stress. This was about how they saw me. My phone buzzed again. It was a message from Mom. Transfer your share to your brother. If you don't bother coming home. I read it once, then again. My hands started to shake. I felt like the ground under me had disappeared. This wasn't just Daniel asking anymore. This was my own mother choosing a side, and it wasn't mine. I stood up and walked around the house, trying to breathe. I looked at everything differently now. The small table in the corner, the couch I bought for $90, the shelf with books I collected over the years. Every single thing in that house had a story, and every story had one thing in common. I built it on my own. No one gave me anything. Not even them. I picked up my phone again. More messages were coming in. Daniel, stop being difficult. Mom, you're making a big mistake. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. My mind was full of noise, fear, anger, confusion. A part of me wanted to give in. It would be easier. Just send the money, say sorry, and everything would go back to normal. But then I asked myself something simple. Was that normal ever fair? I remembered the time Daniel lost his job, and I sent him $3,000 without asking for it back. I remembered paying $2,000 for Mom's medical bills when she needed help. I remembered all the birthdays, all the small sacrifices, all the times I said yes when I wanted to say no. And now, when I finally had something of my own, they wanted that too. I took a deep breath and opened a flight booking website. My heart started beating faster. It felt like I was doing something wrong, even though I knew I wasn't. I searched for flights to America. I didn't overthink the city. I just picked one that felt far enough. There was a ticket leaving that same evening. $850. I hesitated for a second, staring at the price. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't just a ticket. It was a way out. Before I could change my mind, I clicked book. The confirmation email came within seconds. It was done. I closed the laptop slowly and looked around my house again. This time, it didn't feel as comforting. It felt like a place I was about to leave behind forever. Packing was harder than I expected. I opened my closet and stood there for a long time, not knowing what to take. How do you pack your life into one suitcase? I chose simple things. Clothes, a few personal items, and a photo of me with my parents from years ago. Back when we still smiled like everything was okay. I almost left it behind, but something stopped me. Maybe I wasn't ready to let go of everything. My phone kept buzzing on the table. I didn't check it. By the time I finished packing, it was already afternoon. I ordered a taxi and stood by the door with my suitcase. For a moment, I couldn't move. This house had been my safe place for so long. Leaving it felt like stepping into the unknown. But staying didn't feel safe anymore either. So I walked out. The ride to the airport was quiet. The driver didn't ask questions, and I was grateful for that. I just watched the streets pass by, thinking about everything and nothing at the same time. When I arrived, I paid the driver, grabbed my suitcase, and stepped into the busy airport. People were everywhere, families, couples, travelers rushing from one place to another. It felt strange to be surrounded by so many people and still feel completely alone. I checked in, went through security, and finally sat down near my gate. That's when I turned my phone on again. The screen lit up instantly. Messages. Calls. Notifications. Daniel, answer your phone. Mom, Sophia, don't do this. Daniel, if you leave without fixing this, don't expect things to be the same. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I turned the phone off again. I wasn't going to argue anymore. When boarding was announced, I stood up and joined the line. My hands were slightly shaking, but I kept moving forward, step by step. On the plane, I found my seat and sat down, holding onto the armrest like it was the only stable thing in my life. A man sitting next to me smiled politely. Long flight ahead, he said. I nodded. Yeah. Going to America for work, he asked. I thought about it for a moment. No, I said quietly. I think I'm going there to start over. He didn't ask anything else, just smiled again and said, that sounds like a good reason. As the plane took off, I looked out the window. The city I had known my whole life slowly disappeared beneath the clouds. I didn't know what was waiting for me on the other side. But for the first time, I knew exactly what I was leaving behind. The moment the plane landed in America, my chest felt tight again. During the flight, I had managed to calm my thoughts, telling myself I had made the right decision. But as soon as my feet touched the ground, reality came rushing back. I was alone, far from everything I had ever known, and my family was still out there, angry, demanding, and waiting. I walked through the airport slowly, holding my suitcase close, trying to focus on small things like signs, voices, and the sound of footsteps around me. It helped keep my mind from going back to the messages I hadn't read yet. When I finally reached a quiet corner near the exit, I took a deep breath and turned my phone back on. It lit up instantly. The screen filled with notifications, messages, missed calls, voicemails. My heart started beating faster as I scrolled. 43 missed calls. Most of them were from Daniel. Some from Mom. And one from Dad. That stopped me. Dad never called unless it was serious. For a second, I just stared at his name on the screen, feeling a mix of fear and something else I didn't want to admit. Hope, maybe. Hope that he would understand. Hope that he would tell me it was okay to keep my share, that I didn't have to give up everything to keep the peace. I sat down on a bench and pressed play. At first, there was silence. Then his voice came through, loud, sharp, and filled with anger. Sophia, what are you doing? Why aren't you answering your phone? Your brother needs that money. You're being selfish. Each word hit harder than the last. After everything we've done for you, this is how you act? You think you can just run away? Fix this. Transfer the money and stop making problems. The message ended suddenly, but the echo of his voice stayed in my head. I didn't move. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at nothing, feeling something heavy settle inside me. It wasn't just anger. It was disappointment. It was the slow realization that the one person I thought might stand in the middle had chosen a side too. And again, it wasn't mine. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the bench. Memories started coming back, one after another, like scenes I couldn't stop. I remembered being younger, always trying to do the right thing, always trying to make them proud, helping whenever I could, never asking for anything in return. I remembered sending money when Daniel needed help, covering expenses when things got hard at home, and telling myself that this is what family does. But now, sitting alone in a foreign country, I started to see it differently. It wasn't just help. It had become expectation. And now, it had turned into demand. I opened my eyes and looked at my phone again. My fingers hovered over the screen. For a brief moment, I considered calling back. Maybe I could explain. Maybe if I just said the right words, they would understand. But then I thought about Mom's message. Transfer it to him or don't bother coming home. That wasn't a conversation. That was a condition. And I was tired of living under conditions. Slowly, I opened my banking app. My balance showed clearly, my savings and my $60,000 inheritance. It was more money than I had ever had at once, and suddenly it felt like the center of everything. Not because of its value, but because of what it represented. My independence. My choices. My future. My hand trembled slightly as I hovered over the transfer option. It would take less than a minute. One simple action, and all the pressure would disappear. The calls would stop. The anger would fade. Maybe things would go back to the way they were. But then another thought came. Would they? Or would this just be the beginning of something worse? I imagined the future if I gave in. More expectations. More pressure. More moments where my needs came last. I imagined always being the one who had to sacrifice just to keep everyone else happy. And for the first time, that future scared me more than being alone. I locked my phone. Not just the screen, but everything. I went into my settings and changed my passwords. Every single one. My bank account, my email, my social media. I removed any shared access, any old details they might still have. I turned off notifications. I blocked numbers, first Daniel, then Mom, then even Dad. It felt strange, heavy, but also necessary. When I was done, I stared at the phone in my hand. The silence that followed felt different. Not empty, but quiet in a way I hadn't felt before. Like a storm had passed, even if the damage was still there. That night, I checked into a small hotel near the airport. The room cost $70, and it was simple: a bed, a small table, and a window looking out onto a dimly lit street. I placed my suitcase in the corner and sat on the edge of the bed, finally letting myself breathe. For the first time in days, no one was calling me. No one was telling me what to do. No one was asking me to give something up. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened. It still hurt. Of course it did. They were my family. That doesn't just disappear overnight. But something inside me had changed. I had drawn a line, and I didn't cross it. As the room grew quiet and the night settled in, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. I didn't just leave Europe. I left the version of myself that always said yes, even when it meant losing everything. And maybe, just maybe, that was the bravest thing I had ever done. The first morning I woke up in America, everything felt unfamiliar, but not in a bad way. The light coming through the window looked different, softer somehow, and the quiet in my hotel room felt peaceful instead of heavy. For the first time in a long while, I didn't wake up thinking about what someone else expected from me. I just lay there for a moment, breathing slowly, letting the reality settle in. I was really here, and I had chosen this. I got up, got dressed, and stepped outside. The air was cool, and the streets were already alive with people moving quickly, each of them busy with their own lives. No one looked at me twice. No one knew my name. No one knew my story. At first, it felt strange, almost lonely, but then I realized something important. No one was judging me either. I was free to be whoever I wanted to be. I walked into a small cafe and ordered a coffee for $4. I held the warm cup in my hands and sat by the window, watching people pass by. It felt like I was seeing the world from a new perspective, like I had stepped outside of my old life and could finally see it clearly. I thought about my house in Europe, about the memories I had left behind, and for a moment, I felt a quiet sadness. But it didn't take over me the way it used to. It just sat there, gently, like something I could carry without breaking. Over the next few days, I started looking for a place to live. It wasn't easy. Everything felt expensive, and I had to be careful with my money. My $60,000 wasn't just savings, it was my safety, my future. I couldn't waste it. I visited a few apartments, some too small, some too costly, some that just didn't feel right. Then I found one that felt okay. Not perfect, but safe. It had a small bedroom, a simple kitchen, and a window that let in enough light. The rent was $950 a month. It made me nervous, but I knew I could manage if I was careful. Signing that lease felt like another step forward. Another decision I made for myself, without pressure, without guilt. Finding a job was the next challenge. I walked through different streets, looking at shop windows, reading help wanted signs, and trying to gather the courage to walk in and ask. It wasn't easy. There were moments I doubted myself, moments I wondered if I had made a mistake coming here alone. But each time that thought came, I reminded myself why I left. I didn't come here because it was easy. I came here because I needed to. One afternoon, I walked into a small bookstore. It was quiet, with shelves full of books and a calm atmosphere that made me feel comfortable right away. Behind the counter was a woman named Laura. She looked at me with a kind expression and asked if I needed help. I hesitated for a second, then said, "I saw the sign outside. Are you hiring?" She studied me for a moment, not in a harsh way, but like she was trying to understand something deeper. Then she smiled slightly. "Do you like books?" she asked. "Yes," I said honestly. "They've helped me through a lot." She nodded. "That's a good enough reason." That was it. No long questions. No pressure. She offered me a part-time job, and I accepted without hesitation. It wasn't a high salary, but it was enough to start. More importantly, it gave me something stable, something that belonged to this new life I was building. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, things began to feel more normal. I created a routine. I woke up, went to work, came home, cooked simple meals, and sometimes just sat by my window, watching the world outside. There were still quiet moments when I thought about my family. I wondered if they were still angry, if they ever talked about me, or if they had already moved on. But the calls never came again. The messages stopped completely. At first, that silence hurt. It felt like being erased. But over time, it started to feel like something else. Peace. One evening, after closing the bookstore, Laura and I sat for a while, talking. She didn't ask too many questions about my past, but she listened when I chose to share small pieces. At one point, she said something that stayed with me. Sometimes, she said gently, the people we expect to support us are the ones who don't. And sometimes, strangers become the ones who do. I didn't respond right away, but I understood what she meant. Life in America wasn't perfect. There were days I felt lonely. Days I missed the familiar streets of Europe, even if those streets were tied to painful memories. There were moments I questioned my choices, moments when fear crept in quietly. But there were also moments of strength. Moments where I realized I was handling things on my own. Moments where I felt proud of myself. One night, I stood by the window of my apartment, looking at the city lights. The room behind me was simple, just like my old house, but it felt different. It didn't carry the weight of expectations. It didn't feel like a place where I had to prove anything to anyone. It was just mine. I thought about the money again, my $60,000. It was still there, untouched. But it didn't feel like the center of my life anymore. It was important, yes, but it was no longer something that defined me or controlled my choices. What mattered more was what I had built around it. My independence. My space. My voice. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. I didn't know what the future would bring. I didn't know if I would ever speak to my family again, or if things would somehow change one day. But for now, I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. I had already made my choice. And standing there, in a quiet apartment in America, I realized something simple but powerful. I didn't run away. I moved forward. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.